An unexpected guest in first class. The soft hum of the jet engines vibrated through the luxurious first-class cabin of Royal Skies Flight 418, a prestigious airline known for catering to the world's elite. The ambience was one of quiet opulence, plush leather seats spaced far apart for privacy, polished mahogany side tables, and a scent of fresh linen mixed with subtle notes of expensive cologne and perfume. Passengers were already settling into their seats, sipping pre-flight champagne, scanning business reports on their tablets, or idly chatting about luxury investments and vacation homes in the south of France. It was the kind of environment where everyone seemed to know, or at least recognize, one another, exclusive in the unspoken way that made outsiders immediately visible. And Zara Okoye? She was most definitely an outsider in their eyes. She stepped into the aisle, adjusting the strap of her leather tote bag on her shoulder, her face composed but her mind already aware of the silent scrutiny around her. The moment she entered first class, a few subtle but unmistakable things happened. A middle-aged woman in pearls lowered her designer sunglasses to get a better look. A man in a navy suit, holding a whiskey glass, barely hid his side glance, his lips twitching in curiosity. The flight attendants, who had been bustling around attending to passengers with warm efficiency, suddenly stiffened. Zara noticed all of it. She had dealt with these reactions before, the hesitation, the doubt, the silent question written across their faces, what is she doing here? Her outfit, while elegant, was understated, a cream-colored jumpsuit, tailored to fit her tall, slender frame, paired with simple gold studs in her ears. No excessive jewelry, no designer logos. Just classic, refined minimalism. But to them, it probably wasn't enough. Still, she kept her expression neutral as she glanced down at her boarding pass, seat 1B. As she made her way toward her seat, a flight attendant with sharp blue eyes and platinum blonde hair stepped in her path, blocking her way. "Excuse me, miss, but I believe you're in the wrong section," the woman said, her voice polite but firm. Her name tag read Melissa Grant. Her professional smile was tight, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Zara tilted her head slightly. Here we go, she thought. No, I believe I'm in the right section, Zara replied smoothly, extending her boarding pass. Melissa took it, glancing down, and the brief flicker of disbelief that passed over her face did not go unnoticed. She recovered quickly, but not fast enough. "Oh," she said, forcing a light chuckle. "I see. It's just that, we don't usually, well, we like to verify our passengers for security reasons." Zara raised an eyebrow. "Of course. I assume you verify all passengers in first class this way?" A slight flush crept up Melissa's neck, but she maintained her tight-lipped smile. "It's just standard procedure. If you don't mind, I'll have my colleague confirm." Before Zara could reply, another flight attendant, Ethan Price, approached. Ethan, tall and broad-shouldered, had a perfect flight attendant smile, the kind that looked friendly on the surface but could quickly turn frosty when needed. He was carrying a tray of champagne flutes, but the moment he saw Zara and the conversation taking place, his smile faltered slightly. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his eyes flickering between Zara and Melissa. "No problem at all," Zara answered before Melissa could speak. "I was just explaining that I am in my assigned seat, 1B. Melissa handed Ethan the boarding pass, and for a second, the same flicker of doubt crossed his features. He scanned the pass, hesitated, then glanced up at Zara. "Everything checks out," he finally said. Melissa's lips pressed together, but she nodded stiffly and stepped aside. "Right this way," she said. Zara took her seat, gracefully placing her bag under the console in front of her. She didn't miss the way Ethan and Melissa exchanged looks before walking away. She had seen this story play out many times before. But what they didn't know. By the end of this flight, their entire perception of her, and their jobs, would never be the same. The whispering begins. As the plane continued boarding, Zara pulled out her phone and casually scrolled through her emails. But she could feel their eyes on her. Across the aisle, the middle-aged woman in pearls was still glancing at her, whispering something to the man in the navy suit next to her. And just a few rows ahead, Melissa and Ethan were huddled near the service station, speaking in low voices. "Did you see the way she just walked in here? Yeah, like she actually belongs. Probably some last-minute upgrade. Or maybe she's someone's assistant and got lucky. Or a +1 for some guy who couldn't make it." Zara almost laughed. She had heard it all before. What was it about people that made them assume a black woman sitting in first class must be someone's assistant, girlfriend, or charity case? She considered turning around and calling them out, but she decided to let it play out. She had learned long ago that some lessons were best taught through experience. When hospitality turns to hostility. 20 minutes into the flight, Zara leaned back in her seat and pressed the service button for a drink. A moment later, Melissa appeared, her smile carefully rehearsed. "Yes? I'd love a glass of cranberry juice, please," Zara requested. Melissa hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, before replying. "Actually, we reserve our premium drink selections for first-class passengers who are members of our frequent flyer program. Would you like a bottle of water instead?" Zara blinked slowly. "I see," she said. "And does that rule apply to everyone here? Or just me?" Melissa's smile wavered. "I assure you, it's policy." Zara said nothing. She simply held Melissa's gaze, cool, unbothered, unflinching. Melissa cleared her throat. "I'll see what I can do." She walked off. And then she never came back. Zara watched as Melissa and Ethan continued serving drinks to every other first-class passenger. When, after nearly 20 minutes, no drink had arrived, Zara exhaled slowly and stood up. She took her time walking toward the galley, where both flight attendants were busy laughing with another passenger. She waited until Melissa noticed her presence and turned, her smile dropping slightly. "Oh, did you need something?" "Yes," Zara said evenly. "I believe I asked for a drink about 20 minutes ago." Melissa gave an innocent blink. "Oh. Did you? I must have forgotten." Zara gave her a slow, knowing smile. "No worries. I'm sure it won't happen again." Melissa flushed, but she quickly grabbed a glass and poured the juice. She handed it to Zara without meeting her eyes. Zara took the glass with a polite nod, then turned and headed back to her seat. She could feel their nervous glances behind her. Oh, they were going to regret this. Because what they didn't know? She wasn't just any first-class passenger. She was married to their boss. And by the end of this flight, that fact would change everything. The storm before the truth. The first-class cabin of Royal Sky's Flight 418 hummed with the low murmur of casual conversation, the occasional clinking of glasses, and the subtle rustle of silk and linen as passengers shifted comfortably in their spacious seats. The world outside was nothing but an endless expanse of sky, the plane soaring at 35,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean. But inside, an entirely different storm was brewing, one that Melissa and Ethan had no idea was about to consume them. Silent observations and subtle snubs. Zara Okoye sipped her cranberry juice slowly, the cool tartness settling on her tongue as she leaned back into the plush leather seat. She had always found it amusing, how people could be so bold in their microaggressions yet so ignorant of who they were dealing with. It wasn't just the drink delay. She had seen how Ethan had personally escorted a blonde woman to her seat, ensuring she was comfortable, offering her a warm towel, but when Zara walked in, she was interrogated. She had seen how Melissa had laughed and joked with the older man in a tailored suit, touching his shoulder lightly, but had given Zara nothing but stiff politeness. And she had definitely noticed how, when she stood up to stretch her legs, an older couple sitting 2 rows ahead had clutched their belongings just a little bit tighter. Oh yes, she noticed everything. And she was done playing along. The turning point. About an hour into the flight, dinner service began. The scent of buttered filet mignon, garlic-seasoned asparagus, and freshly baked bread wafted through the cabin as attendants moved methodically down the aisle. Ethan approached her row, his ever-present polished smile in place. "We have 2 options for dinner tonight," he announced, carefully avoiding direct eye contact. "Would you like the herb-crusted salmon or the beef tenderloin?" Zara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tilted her head, watching him. "I'll take the beef tenderloin," she said finally, handing back the menu. Ethan nodded. "Excellent choice. And your drink?" Zara handed him the empty glass. "Cranberry juice," she said, her voice smooth but firm. Ethan hesitated, just a fraction of a second, before nodding. Of course. But when he returned with the meal, something was missing. He placed the beautifully plated steak and side dishes in front of her, accompanied by a glass of water, but no cranberry juice. Zara exhaled slowly, her patience thinning by the second. "Excuse me," she said, lifting an eyebrow. "I believe I asked for cranberry juice." Ethan gave a thin-lipped smile. "Oh, my apologies. Let me check if we have any left." Before she could respond, he turned and walked away. Zara stared at his retreating back, her expression unreadable. Melissa walked past, noticing the interaction, and shot Ethan a quick questioning glance. Zara didn't miss it. The silent communication. The shared understanding. She had seen enough. The call that changed everything. Zara reached into her tote bag and pulled out her phone, unlocking it with a simple tap. A few quick movements, a name selected from her favorites, and the call began to ring. After a beat, a deep, commanding voice answered on the other end. "Hey, love. Miss me already?" Zara smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You could say that," she replied smoothly. "Everything all right?" her husband asked, picking up on the slight edge in her tone. Zara glanced up, making direct eye contact with Melissa, who had just turned to look in her direction. "Oh, everything's just fine," she said sweetly. "I just wanted to let you know about the exceptional service I've been receiving on your airline." There was a pause on the other end. And then, in a quiet but unmistakably serious tone, he said, "Tell me everything." Repercussions in motion. The moment Zara ended the call, she could already feel the shifts happening around her. Ethan and Melissa were both watching her now, sensing that something wasn't quite right. A few moments later, Melissa approached, trying to mask her concern with professional politeness. "Ms. Okoye, is there anything I can do for you?" Zara leaned back in her seat, her fingers lightly tapping the armrest. "That depends," she said smoothly. "How long does it usually take for a simple drink request to be fulfilled? Or is there a different policy for passengers like me?" Melissa's eyes flickered with discomfort, but she quickly recovered. "I apologize for any oversight," she said quickly. "I'll get that drink right away." And this time, she practically sprinted to the galley. Zara didn't even need to say anything else. She simply watched as the attendants, now suddenly nervous, began moving with newfound urgency, because something was about to change. The big reveal. It didn't take long. Less than 15 minutes later, there was an unexpected announcement over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We would like to extend a special welcome to our VIP passenger today, Mrs. Okoye, the wife of our airline CEO." Dead silence fell over the first-class cabin. Zara, still sipping her now perfectly chilled cranberry juice, smiled softly. Melissa froze mid-step, the blood draining from her face. Ethan, standing near the galley, nearly dropped a tray of glasses. Passengers began murmuring amongst themselves, a few of them suddenly throwing Zara new, curious glances, this time, not filled with judgment, but realization. And then, the real consequences began. The cabin door near the front of first class opened, and a senior manager for Royal Skies Airlines stepped in, his expression serious. He walked straight up to Melissa and Ethan, voice low but firm as he spoke. Zara didn't have to hear the exact words. She already knew. The sudden pale expressions on their faces. The stiff postures. The barely contained panic in their eyes. It was enough. Melissa tried to argue. Ethan stammered. But it didn't matter. Because when you work for an airline, mistreating the CEO's wife isn't just bad service, it's career suicide. And Zara? She simply leaned back, crossed her legs, and watched the show unfold. The flight of consequences. The weight of stunned silence hung in the first-class cabin like a thick fog, swallowing the once lively chatter of passengers. Every movement, every sound, seemed amplified, the clink of a fork against porcelain, the quiet rustling of crisp linen napkins, and the barely perceptible gasp from Melissa as the realization hit her like a crashing wave. She had mistreated the wife of the CEO. And now, everyone knew it. The shattered facade. Ethan's usually perfectly curated smile had all but disappeared. His body was stiff, his hands gripping the tray in front of him as if it were the only thing keeping him standing. His mind raced with excuses, justifications, anything that might salvage the situation. Melissa, on the other hand, felt her stomach drop so violently she thought she might be sick. This must be a misunderstanding, she muttered under her breath. But there was no misunderstanding. The passengers who had once subtly looked down on Zara now threw her stolen glances of curiosity and cautious respect. And Zara? She remained completely at ease, calmly swirling the fresh cranberry juice in her glass, her expression unreadable. But the damage had already been done. A storm of accountability. The senior airline manager, Mr. Collins, adjusted his navy blue suit jacket as he approached. His silver name tag gleamed under the cabin lights, but the fire in his sharp blue eyes was unmistakable. "Mr. Carter, Ms. Hayes, I need a word." "Now," he said, his voice quiet yet laced with authority. Ethan and Melissa exchanged desperate looks, but they had no choice. They followed Mr. Collins into the small, curtained-off crew area near the front of first class. The second the curtain slid shut behind them, Mr. Collins turned on them like a lion cornering its prey. "What the hell were you thinking?" he snapped. Melissa flinched. "Sir, we didn't," she started, but he cut her off. "Didn't what, Ms. Hayes? Didn't publicly humiliate the CEO's wife? Didn't deliberately delay her requests? Didn't assume she didn't belong here because she didn't fit your expectations of a first-class passenger?" Ethan swallowed hard. We thought she was a nanny?" Mr. Collins finished, his expression icy. "And even if she were, does that justify treating her like a second-class citizen?" The curt silence that followed was suffocating. Melissa lowered her gaze, cheeks flushed with shame. Ethan, usually quick with words, was at a complete loss. Mr. Collins sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. "The CEO himself is waiting to hear from me the second we land," he said. "And you two better pray he shows mercy." Melissa's legs wobbled beneath her. She had worked for this airline for 5 years. She had dreamed of becoming a lead flight attendant. But now? Everything she had worked for was slipping through her fingers like sand. Public exposure. Outside the curtain, the cabin had begun to settle into an uneasy normalcy, though passengers were still throwing side glances in Zara's direction. The ripple effect had begun. One older woman, dressed in pearls in a cashmere travel set, leaned slightly toward Zara, a genuine look of concern on her face. "My dear, I hope they didn't ruin your flight," she said softly. Zara smiled politely, but her words carried an edge of steel. "Oh, not at all," she replied smoothly. "I've just been reminded of how interesting people can be when they think they hold power over you." The woman blinked, digesting the words before nodding slowly. And then, as if on cue, the curtain parted, and Mr. Collins stepped out. He cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Royal Skies Airlines, I sincerely apologize for any unprofessional behavior displayed by our crew today." A hush fell over the cabin. "We pride ourselves on excellence, and rest assured, any lapses in service will be handled accordingly," he continued, throwing a sharp look toward Ethan and Melissa, who stood just behind him, their faces pale with humiliation. Passengers murmured among themselves, some nodding in approval, others clearly still in shock. Zara simply took another sip of her juice, letting the moment stretch out before she finally set her glass down. "I appreciate the acknowledgement, Mr. Collins," she said evenly. "I trust this matter will be handled appropriately." "Absolutely, Mrs. Okoye," Mr. Collins replied quickly, clearly eager to smooth things over. Melissa and Ethan stood frozen, every eye in the cabin now on them. For the first time, they truly understood how vulnerable their positions were. Desperation and a final plea. The rest of the flight was a quiet nightmare for Melissa and Ethan. No longer smug or confident, they moved like ghosts through the aisles, their previous authority reduced to nothing but an illusion. A few minutes before landing, as passengers began adjusting their seats and gathering their belongings, Melissa made one last, desperate decision. She approached Zara, her hands clasped in front of her, eyes pleading. "Mrs. Okoye, I want to say I'm truly sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Zara tilted her head slightly, examining her. "You're sorry?" she asked, her voice devoid of emotion. Melissa nodded quickly. "Yes. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I made a mistake. A terrible one. I didn't mean any harm, I just didn't realize." Zara let the silence stretch uncomfortably, before replying. "You mean you didn't realize who I was," she said, her voice laced with quiet disappointment. Melissa's face crumbled. "Please," she whispered. "I don't want to lose my job." Zara studied her for a long moment. Then, she leaned in slightly, her voice soft but piercing. "Let me ask you something, Ms. Hayes," she said. "If I were truly a nanny, if I had been exactly what you assumed me to be, would you still be standing here, apologizing?" Melissa opened her mouth, but no words came. Because they both knew the answer. And that silence? It was the loudest truth of all. The landing that changed everything. The moment the plane touched down, Zara knew the real consequences were about to begin. She could already see, through the tiny gap in the curtains leading to first-class arrivals, a familiar figure waiting just beyond the gate. Her husband. The CEO of Royal Skies Airlines. Ethan and Melissa, noticing the tall, commanding man standing there in an impeccable tailored suit, went deathly still. Because when your boss shows up to personally meet one passenger, you already know. You're in trouble. And this? This was only the beginning. The reckoning at the gate. The moment the plane taxied to the gate, a heavy silence cloaked the first-class cabin. Some passengers stretched in their seats, some retrieved their carry-ons, but many couldn't help but steal one last glance at the woman whose presence had shifted the entire flight's energy. Zara remained poised, calm, unreadable. Her fingers delicately adjusted the silk scarf around her neck, her wedding ring gleaming under the cabin lights. But inside? Inside, she could feel the unraveling of control happening all around her. And waiting just outside? Her husband. Billionaire CEO, Kelechi Okoye. A presence that commanded authority. As the aircraft doors finally swung open, the first-class passengers began gathering their belongings. But for Melissa and Ethan, time felt like it had frozen. Because standing just past the jet bridge was a man no one ever wanted to disappoint. Kelechi Okoye was a towering presence, over 6 feet of quiet authority wrapped in a sharp, tailored navy blue suit. His dark, deep-set eyes were unreadable, his stance deceptively relaxed, but his presence was anything but. Passengers whispered among themselves, some recognizing him, others simply sensing that whoever he was important. Melissa's hands trembled as she adjusted the gold buttons on her uniform. She felt like a child awaiting punishment, her stomach twisting with anxiety. Ethan swallowed hard. He had prided himself on charming his way out of trouble before. But how do you charm a man who built an empire on precision, excellence, and zero tolerance for incompetence? Zara, however, took her time. She didn't rush to disembark. She remained seated, letting the flight attendants and passengers filter out first. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was making them sweat. The walk of shame. The moment Zara finally stood, Melissa instinctively stepped back, suddenly feeling small despite her tall frame. Zara gave her one last glance, her expression unreadable, before turning toward the exit. As she walked down the narrow jet bridge, the murmurs of curious passengers and crew followed her. And then she stepped through the gate and locked eyes with her husband. A slow, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of Kelechi's lips. "Did you enjoy your flight, my love?" he asked, his deep voice sending a ripple through the surrounding airport staff. Zara's own lips curved slightly. "Oh, it was educational," she replied smoothly. Kelechi chuckled softly, though his gaze flickered briefly to the 2 flight attendants standing awkwardly behind her. Melissa's face went pale. Ethan broke into a cold sweat. The 2 of them had hoped, prayed, that maybe, just maybe, Mr. Okoye wouldn't find out. But now, it was painfully clear that not only had he found out, but he had been waiting for them. Mr. Collins, the airline manager, hurried forward, his face tight with stress. "Mr. Okoye, he started, but Kelechi raised a hand, silencing him. His attention remained fixed on Melissa and Ethan. "So," Kelechi finally spoke, his voice even but chillingly calm, "these are the 2 who found it appropriate to humiliate my wife?" Melissa felt her knees nearly buckle. "Sir, please," she stammered, desperate now. "It was all a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Kelechi cut in, his voice razor-sharp. "Let me ask you this, if you had known she was my wife, would you have treated her the same way?" The question hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Melissa's lips parted, but no words came. Because they all knew the answer. Ethan, usually so quick-witted and charming, looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Public accountability. A small crowd had formed just outside the gate now. Some were airport staff, some were other passengers who had overheard what happened on the flight. But every single one of them was watching. Waiting. "Tell me, Ms. Hayes," Kelechi continued, unrelenting, "do you always go out of your way to make first-class passengers feel like they don't belong? Or was it just my wife who received this special treatment?" Melissa opened her mouth again, but "Answer carefully," Kelechi warned. Melissa's eyes burned with unshed tears. She had no escape, no excuse, nothing left. She lowered her gaze. "It was wrong," she finally whispered. "I was wrong." Kelechi nodded once, then turned to the airline manager. "Mr. Collins, what is Royal Sky's policy on discrimination and mistreatment of passengers?" Mr. Collins straightened immediately. "Zero tolerance, sir," he said swiftly. "Any violations result in immediate termination." Ethan's breath hitched. Melissa let out a quiet gasp. Kelechi's gaze remained steady, unreadable. "Then I expect your policy to be enforced," he said simply. The words hit like a hammer. Melissa's world crumbled in an instant. "Sir, please," she begged, stepping forward. I've worked for this airline for 5 years. I made a terrible mistake, but please don't let this ruin my career. And how many careers have you ruined with your bias? Zara finally spoke, her voice low and measured. Melissa froze. How many hard-working people, Zara continued, stepping closer, have you dismissed, insulted, or denied service to simply because you didn't think they belonged? Melissa had no answer. Because she knew, deep down, there were too many. Ethan wasn't any better off. His mind raced for a way out, a way to salvage this, but every word that came to him felt empty, useless. There was nothing they could say that would change the facts. Mr. Collins cleared his throat, uncomfortable but firm. Melissa Hayes and Ethan Carter, he announced, effective immediately, you are both dismissed from Royal Skies Airlines. A heavy silence fell over the area. Melissa swayed on her feet, gripping her uniform as if it could keep her grounded. Ethan looked physically ill, his once perfect composure shattered. They were done. The final words. Zara took a slow, deep breath before looking at them one last time. Maybe next time, she said quietly, you'll think twice before assuming someone's worth based on their appearance. And with that, she took her husband's arm. The power couple walked away, leaving the two disgraced flight attendants standing in the middle of the airport, their careers in ruins, their reputations tarnished forever. As Zara and Kelechi exited through the VIP terminal, Kelechi gently squeezed his wife's hand. You handled that with grace, he murmured. Zara smiled softly. People like them need to learn, she said. And if I had to be the lesson, so be it. Kelechi chuckled. Remind me never to get on your bad side, he teased. Zara laughed, her voice light, free. Because for the first time in that entire flight, justice had been served. When the world watches. The fallout from the Royal Skies airline scandal was instantaneous and brutal. The moment Zara and Kelechi walked out of the airport, the story was no longer just theirs. Because the whole world was watching. And they wanted answers. Social media erupts. It started with a single tweet. A passenger from first class, who had witnessed everything unfold, posted. I just watched 2 flight attendants humiliate a woman for sitting in first class, until they found out she was married to their boss. The way their faces dropped. Face with tears of joy karma. The tweet exploded. Thousands of likes, retweets, and comments flooded in, each one more outraged than the last. Imagine being that bold with your discrimination and then realizing you just ruined your career in front of a billionaire. Yikes. Airlines need to start training their staff better. This kind of discrimination is exhausting. The fact that she stayed calm the entire time? Meanwhile, I would have been throwing hands. Who is this woman? She needs to be protected at all costs. By the time Zara and Kelechi arrived at their penthouse in Manhattan, the incident was already viral. And it didn't stop there. News outlets pick up the story. CNN, BBC, Forbes, and even celebrity gossip pages like TMZ jumped on the breaking news. Police car light headline, Flight crew humiliates woman in first class, until they learn she's the CEO's wife, police car light. The coverage was relentless. Reporters dissected the flight attendants' behavior, replayed passenger testimonies, and analyzed the deeper issue of racial and class discrimination in luxury travel. And just when it seemed like it couldn't get worse for Melissa and Ethan, it did. Because Zara wasn't just any woman. She was Zara Okoye. A human rights advocate. A philanthropist. A woman who had spent years fighting against injustice. And the internet was not letting this go. The airline's desperate damage control. Inside the headquarters of Royal Skies Airlines, executives were in full-blown crisis mode. Mr. Collins, the airline manager who had fired Melissa and Ethan at the gate, was now facing the wrath of the board of directors. Do you realize what kind of PR nightmare this is? one board member barked. Stock prices are already dropping, another shouted. The CEO of the airline, Richard Lorne, sat at the head of the table, fingers pressed against his temples. We need to make this right, immediately, he finally said. Draft a statement. Public apology. And someone get in touch with Mr. Okoye. A frantic PR executive nodded and began typing furiously. 30 minutes later, Royal Skies Airlines released an official statement. Royal Skies Airlines does not condone discrimination of any kind. We sincerely apologize to Mrs. Zara Okoye and her family for the unacceptable treatment she experienced on our flight. The employees involved have been terminated, and we are committed to ensuring this never happens again. But it wasn't enough. Because the public wasn't satisfied. Melissa and Ethan faced the consequences. For Melissa and Ethan, the world had turned against them overnight. They had been fired, publicly shamed, and exposed in ways they had never imagined. The moment their names leaked online, their social media exploded with backlash. So, at Melissa Hayes FA, how's unemployment treating you? Discriminating against passengers didn't age well, did it? At Ethan Carter, crew should have thought twice before trying to humiliate the wrong woman. Melissa had to delete all her accounts. Ethan's LinkedIn page was flooded with negative comments. And worst of all, no airline wanted to hire them. After 5 years of building their careers, they were now considered toxic in the industry. Melissa spent the night crying in her apartment, staring at the news reports, unable to believe how fast everything had fallen apart. Ethan, still in denial, kept trying to call old connections, but every response was the same. Sorry, man. No one wants the bad press. They had gone from respected flight crew members, to cautionary tales. Zara and Kelechi's next move. Back in the Okoye penthouse, Zara scrolled through the millions of messages flooding her inbox. Supporters. Activists. Even celebrities were reaching out, praising her for how she handled the situation. Kelechi poured himself a glass of whiskey, shaking his head as he read the latest headlines. Well, he said, amused, I think they've learned their lesson. But Zara wasn't smiling. Have they? She murmured. Kelechi glanced at her. The 2 flight attendants? Or the airline? He asked. Both. Zara sighed. Because the truth was, this wasn't just about her. This was about every person who had been dismissed, humiliated, or judged unfairly because of their appearance, race, or status. This wasn't just her battle. And she wasn't done yet. She opened her laptop and began typing. Kelechi raised an eyebrow. What are you doing? Starting something bigger, Zara replied. The movement begins. The next morning, Zara posted a video statement on her official social media. What happened to me on that flight happens to people every single day. People who don't have the power to fight back. People who are silenced. But today? We say and no more. This is bigger than me. This is about holding companies accountable. This is about dignity and respect for every person, no matter where they come from. So today, I'm launching the #TravelWithDignity initiative. We're demanding real change from airlines worldwide. We want anti-discrimination training. We want policies that actually protect passengers. And we will not stop until it happens. Within minutes, the #TravelWithDignity began trending. By the end of the day, it had 50 million shares. And within a week, multiple airlines, including Royal Skies, announced new training programs and policy reforms to prevent discrimination in first-class cabins. Zara had done more than just expose injustice. She had started a movement. And this time, the whole world was on her side.